Hi. So, I'm just gonna wait for more people to join this live. Hello. Just gonna be waiting for more people to join this live. While we wait, my stress buster has, when I say stress buster, he really is my stress buster. I think he's helped me so much in dealing with all of my anxiety, and I guess if someone told me, a pet can help you with anxiety, I would have been really angry because if my stress is serious, my anxiety is extremely serious. How can you say that a pet can solve this? I understand, but you'd be surprised how much he has helped me. But then again, I'm not here to give you my expert advice on mental health. Today we're going to be speaking to Chandy. She has more than 25 years of experience in the domain of mental health, and she is also the chairperson of the board of trustees of the Live, Love, Laugh Foundation by Deepika Padukone. So I'm just going to wait for her request. Is that how it works? Okay, somebody needs to help me with how do you do this, Ash? How do you accept her request? Okay, no idea. Okay, let me just see this request. Okay, so many comments, so I am not able to find her request. Let me just request. Guys, her request. Yeah. I was scared that I was not going to be able to get you live, and that would have been a colossal failure.
No, but I was listening, and I think you started very well about the value of having pets. They're very, very therapeutic, especially during this time, because they give us unconditional support and love.
Clearly. And also tries to steal limelight whenever. So, Anna, I also wanted to tell my followers or whoever's tuned in that you have been my counselor. You have been my counselor in tough times, and which is why I feel that it's so important that you are here today. One second, I'm just going to. That you are here today to help whoever needs your help in the little time that we have, because mental health is the word that we hear so much, so many in the current scenario. It's very tough for everyone, and I have a few questions so that we can get right to it.
Sure.
So the first that I have for you is how do you distinguish between the normal everyday stress, that we are used to by now, and a real distress call? That when is the time that one really needs to seek external help to deal with the distress?
Okay. So let me start with telling you that stress is by itself is not a bad thing, We have what is called good stress, which we call eustress, EUSTRESS. And then we have stress that pulls us down, which makes us anxious, which is called distress. We need a certain amount of stress to function in our day-to-day lives. However, currently what's happening to all of us is we are all going through what we call collective anxiety, collective trauma, and collective grief. And one of the things about anxieties is that anxiety can also be contagious. That I'm anxious, so with this current situation, so I tend to pass it on. And that's why also one of the reasons why pets is good, because when I'm anxious and I'm just with my pet, it kind of helps me take a pause and it gives me some comfort.
Yes. So, you know, we are just not dealing with stress, especially with the virus. There are physical and mental conditions that attach itself that stress triggers. We all know by now stress causes a weakened immune system. So it's not just stress, it's also other conditions that come along with it. So please explain this.
So I think the first step is to understand what we are all going through, and let's look at what we are going through. Is we are anxious because we are living in uncertain times. We don't know where the end is for this uncertainty, how long, how much. And predominantly human beings, we like predictability. And therefore we are feeling out of control. And when we feel out of control, our stress primarily plays out mostly in two ways. Some of us become over-functioning and some of us become under-functioning. The over-functioning people, they exhibit their stress. They tend to start becoming over-controlling. They start micromanaging, and they start actually becoming, the others experience them as very bossy. The under-functioning people who are dealing with stress as under-functioning, they're not able to be fully present. They're not able to be fully 100% there. Now we need to understand that we are doing this because we are trying to take charge or take control of something, because we are feeling so destabilized. That's the first thing about the uncertainty, which adds to stress, this condition. Along with that, what's happening now is that there is so much grief because so many people have been suffering loss in terms of death of loved ones, death of friendship, death of youngsters losing their dreams, children not being able to have that social interaction of school. So there's a lot of grief. And along with that, now we have an added grief. It's desperate to even breathe, oxygen cylinders, beds in hospitals. So you can imagine the chaos in our lives and what this chaos is. It's just adding to our burdens, and therefore
I think the voice is, I think connection is breaking a bit. I'm losing you. I'm losing you a bit.
yeah. Can you hear?
Little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we are in a state of destabilization. We are feeling, we're not feeling anchored or grounded, which is adding to our grief, which is adding to our uncertainty. And therefore, we are all in a state of hypervigilance. We are hypervigilant because there's a part of our brain which is called the amygdala, which actually keeps us in a state where we are feeling in threat. Therefore, I think it's very important that we all first name all our feelings And if we are not able to contain ourselves, we take support. It's important to take this support, because when we name our feelings, then we are naming our vulnerabilities, and that enables us to actually be able to problem solve in some areas. We can't problem solve everything, but some areas. So I think we are in a crisis, and I'm really happy that you brought up this Insta Live, because along with this pandemic, mental health experts are now warning that we are going to have what is called a shadow pandemic. That
Sorry,
is,
what say that was?
so a shadow pandemic is where people actually have mental health issues. America has released some data. In America, it's 1:3. That means every third person is going to have some mental health issue. I think in India, we are going to have a lot of issues, not just now, in the coming months, even when we've recovered from this, because we've had such negative experiences, and it's going to be like that for us. So I think this is
So,
something. Yeah,
so it's really important for people to not think that they are alone in this, you know. So I
no.
think mental health, there is still so much stigma around it. There is when you know physical health and all the other issues are in on the front stage, you know. But mental health somehow people just brush off saying it's okay. But I want you to explain how mental health is connected to everything else.
So we can't separate physical health from mental health, simply because we need to understand that they're closely interrelated, and each supports the other. If you want to have your immunity rise, you need to have good mental health. When we are anxious, we certain hormones that we term as happy hormones are minimized. When they are minimized, our immunity comes down. When our immunity comes down, we are more prone to getting attacked by the virus. So you can't separate the two. That is why all of us who are mental health experts are saying, do not separate physical from mental health. For you must maintain physical health, and you must maintain your mental health. Physical health, of course, everybody knows through physical activities. The kind of foods you eat, minimize caffeine and alcohol. Physical exercise, yoga, most important, your breath, just so that your whole lymphatic system is optimized. Mental health is taking support, and just like you said, Sam, to be able to reach out and take support and expose and share your vulnerability, name whatever you're feeling, because diverse people have diverse feelings and experiences. Along with that, simple exercises that you do, which I've actually said people should do, which is, of course, journaling, uh, finding something that you find less taxing, which replenishes you psychologically. And the one that I'm encouraging people to please stop is something called doom scrolling. That is, because there's a general doom, I'm beginning to see a lot of people going on looking at all these terrible images and just filling themselves up with negative news or negative information. This adds to our anxiety. I know that we need to have information to keep ourselves safe and to protect ourselves, but we need to be cautious on the kind of information we consume and how much we consume and which time of the day we consume. Why do I say that? I always tell people, refrain from negative information, say after 8 p.m. in the night,
Okay,
because
really
yeah,
important. Refrain
yeah,
from consumption of information of any kind uh, after 8 p.m.
yeah. And I'll tell you the reason, because you may be physically tired, so your body may sleep, but your unconscious is processing all this negative information that you've been absorbing. So that's why it's important.
See, when you
And
said you also said, Anna, that express your vulnerabilities. When you say that, I feel that there is a stark difference between how men process stress and anxiety and express that stress and anxiety, and how women process and express this. So, is this true? And
Yes, yes, because uh, in the end, we are influenced by the cultures that we've been brought up. And traditionally, in our Asian culture, men are taught, it's a learned behavior to express vulnerability through being angry, through being controlling, etc. Women, in that case, are taught that they should not express anger, but they should be more express sadness and grief and fear. So these are two, but they're all part of the same continuum of excessive anxiety. Now, having said that, the other thing which I say is, how are people vulnerable? For example, we keep telling people when they're talking about their vulnerability, oh, be strong, stay strong.
yeah.
When people are very vulnerable and they're very sad, it is the wrong thing to tell them, because you're actually telling them to bottle up all their feelings and not express what's going on with them, and that will impact their physical health and it will show up.
How would you
So
tell
it's
men this?
so when we tell people be strong or don't worry, we are actually, what we are doing is, we are not actually comforting them. We are trying to, because we can't cope with their distress. So when people are expressing vulnerabilities, or they're expressing anguish, or they're expressing sorrow, the first step is to listen to them. Pay attention to what they are saying. Some people may repeatedly express the same thing over and over again, and that expression is really because they're trying to make meaning of their stories. The second thing is, when you talk to people, when in this kind of situation, talk small, crisp sentences. Okay, it helps them.
I remember you
And
were doing this as well.
yeah, yeah, it
Yeah.
helps them. And the third thing which I always say is, don't give them a time that they have to recover from grief. There is no time. Each one recovers at their pace. And grief is not such a straightforward, straight line that we start here and we end here. Grief can be roundabout. Grief is gray. And people have to make meaning of that experience. So it's most important, I always say, to be with them where they are. And normally people take some time. Some people take a few months, some people take little later. If you, as a friend or a loved one, find it very difficult to keep listening, it is okay to gently tell that person, I'm finding it difficult and I'm feeling overwhelmed. So I would recommend that you take therapeutic support, which is using a counselor or a psychotherapist, or even a social worker, mental health social worker.
Okay. So that brings me to my next question. How how do you support a friend or a family member who is in distress? Because right now, a lot of people, they come to friends, they come to family members, they go on the internet, how to deal with stress and anxiety. But we are in the midst of a pandemic. Nobody has answers. One is as clueless as the other. So, in such a situation, what is the best way to support someone who needs your help?
I think the first step when someone needs help is to listen to them. When I say listen, there is a difference between listening and hear. Yeah, there's a difference between listening and hearing. Okay, listening means to be fully present and listen to what they're saying, to the story, but focus on the feelings. The second step, as I said, is to make small, crisp, short sentences. The third thing is to actually just be with them in whatever emotional state they are. Don't tell them it's wrong or right. Why do I say that? Typically, when there is grief and loss, there are few stages that happen. People the first thing is shock and disbelief. Then it's denial. Then it's anger. Then it's sadness. Then there is guilt. And then there is acceptance. It doesn't mean that they have to go in that order. They can skip and go back and forth, but you have to help them go through those stages, because that is how they finally recover. Once they've accepted, then they're able to move on. In this time, during this time, Sam, I'd like you to know, a lot of people suffer from a particular type of guilt, and it's called survivor's guilt. If a parent has lost their young one, the question they'll ask is, why was it not me and why them? Or if they're frontline workers, they'll repeatedly ask themselves, could I have done something more? Did I do something less? Or it can be, they will keep thinking, where did I miss out? Why didn't I notice something? So these are typical questions that people who suffer from survivor's guilt have. And when people suffer from survivor's guilt, they repeatedly keep thinking of what happened. They ruminate, which means they keep chewing and going on thinking of what happened, because they are so overwhelmed. At that point, when you are going to be listening to them, it's okay to actually tell them and keep assuring them that you did your best. You did your best. Now, if they can't, then you could actually tell them, now, maybe you actually write down what all you did and what all you didn't. So then they'll get clarity. In spite of that, yeah, in spite of that, if they are not able to get over guilt, then it's important that you flag it to them that they need additional support.
So, Anna, I also see a lot of anger. Um, it's There's so much anger filling my social media pages. It's I don't know. Is this a way to show pain and grief, that it comes out as anger? There's a need to blame someone for what's happening. Uh, how would you explain this extreme anger that people are feeling and expressing?
I think this extreme anger, and especially on social media or trolling people or uh, being brutal. I hear people being brutal with their words and their tone and gestures, etc. It's a form of lashing out, because you know that you are not able to do anything and you're feeling helpless, and you're hoping that by blaming you will get relief. You will not get relief. That's why I use the word in the beginning. This is collective. It not only is collective trauma, it also now has become collective responsibility for all of us to be able to contribute so that we recover from this experience.
Okay, so what would you tell someone who is lashing out, with anger? Tell that.
I think it's important that when people, any feeling which is very intense, whether it's anger, whether it's sadness, whether it is excessive controlling, whether it's excessive, uh, any activity excessive, even physical activity, anything that's excessive is a big signal that the anxiety is now moving into what we term clinical anxiety. One is being anxious because of the situation, and now it's moving into clinical, and it's a signal for such people and their loved ones to actually guide them and direct them to take clinical support.
And I just also want you to say that it's okay to seek clinical support. Uh, Please, when I mentioned to people, I have a counselor, I'm undergoing counseling. People are like, what do you mean, like, how can you not solve this on your own? Be strong. It's nothing, it will go away on its own. So for this reason, there are so many people who don't take that next step when they really really need it. uh, so how should we as a society destigmatize mental health?
I think the first is what you actually did, because I think you are a leader in your own rights. You have followers, and when you expose your vulnerability, it's the first thing. When you name it that you've taken support, you're actually telling the world that you're human, and you're therefore, when you're human, you're vulnerable. So I think the first step is that. The second step is actually in destigmatizing is that people actually don't take therapeutic support because they're mentally ill. It's not because they're mentally ill. They're taking therapeutic support or counseling support because they want how to know how to manage certain life issues more effectively. That's the reality. And the third part, which I think which is very important, is the language that we use when we are either thinking about the stigma, which is the language we use on how we label ourselves, or the language that we use when we are talking to people, where we normalize taking support. And I give you a simple example. If you actually, you of course have shared, and I'm very, very proud of you. If you listen to Michelle Obama, she talks about how when she became the first lady, there was a lot of trolling about her not, being who she was, they expected. And she said how they took support. And then she also talks about how, uh, both Barack Obama and she actually took additional therapeutic support during that time when he was the president, because there was so much pressure on their marriage. These are very natural things that happen to all of us. The more we speak, the more we normalize life. At this point, I think it's important to say that, I've had questions, and I'm sure your followers have young children in the house, questions about what do you tell children now?
Exactly.
Actually, you know, actually, from the time a child is about 3 to 4 years old, they do know and understand age appropriately about death. And now there is a crisis. So I think it's important to talk to little children, give them information according to their age so that they can cope. Otherwise, you're telling them everything is okay, but they are experiencing their parents as anxious, and that makes them more confused. So
So
it's
you
okay.
young parents to try and make children understand the situation and not hide them from it. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. Yes. Understand according to their age, what we call age appropriate information.
Okay, that's interesting. So I think we're at the end, and I know it's very difficult right now to see the silver lining or a positive takeaway from this pandemic. But we as human beings need to be optimistic. We need that hope, a hope that the future is going to be better and brighter. So for you, what would be the one positive takeaway from all of this?
I think, yes, we've been it's a disaster. It's been a national crisis. But I think what I see very positive is the solidarity, the courage, and the selflessness that all the citizens have come together, and the kind of contributions, whether it is, people volunteering, or whether it's the frontline workers, whatever said, there's been a coming together. And I look at that as very positive, that while there is collective pain, solidarity.
Lost you again.
I said,
Yes.
I believe I believe that while there's collective pain, there's collective solidarity and courage. And to me, that is at this point what keeps us going. Even as mental health workers, I start my day at 5:30 in the morning, I finish at 10:30. But what keeps me going is these, just remembering the coming together of all of us.
Yes. Yes, for me, even in the midst of all of this chaos, that is um, something that, gratitude, us sticking together for one another, people we don't know of. There are so when I see volunteers and healthcare workers, um, it has been also equally inspiring to watch. And as far as my journey with mental health and anxiety, I've come a long way from where I used to be. And I believe that from the fact that I've come a long way, at a point I probably thought that I need to live with it. There are many days I woke up with anxiety, believing that this is normal for me. I'm going to live the rest of my life with this kind of anxiety. But 1.5 years later, I think I've been speaking to you for
Yeah,
a year, so Anna. So I am in such a better place because I sought to speak to someone else. I started practices like meditation, breathing, yoga, and when you do it again and again and again, some days you're lazy, uh, you are too anxious. You're too anxious where you can't sit still for 10 seconds. Your mind is wandering and you have 100 thoughts at the same time. But if you make sure you do it despite all of these thoughts and despite all of these feelings, and then eventually you get to a place that you only dreamt that you could be at, and so, which is why I wanted to tell whoever's on this live right now that it is possible to improve your mental health tremendously. And I only wish all of my followers here, and thank you for your time. But I do have some questions I asked my followers yesterday what were their questions. So I have just 5 questions. Quickly, I'm going to ask you those questions. From Soumya, if you are someone with anxiety issues, but you have figured out certain self-coping mechanisms that work for you, like yoga, journaling, is that enough, or do you still need to figure out the root cause of that anxiety?
If you're coping and you're managing, that's fine. When your anxiety, if it goes to a stage where it goes out of control, then you need to take help.
So you don't need to go searching for that root cause. You don't need to do that.
If you're coping, it's fine. You don't need to, if you're coping.
Okay. My next question is from Nirgul. Tips on how to mentally prepare yourself for the fact that you might get sick from this virus. I think this is very, very important, because the fear that I'm going to get it. Oh my God, I'm going to get it. So how do you deal with that fear, the anticipation that you get sick?
I think the first step is, again, there's stigma with the virus. It's okay if you get the virus. That will bring down the stigma, which is important. The first steps is, as soon as you experience any symptoms, reach out. And the next thing is, most of the people recover. It's a certain percentage that actually falls deeply ill. Ask for help, minimize the stigma, and it's okay if you've got the virus. And the other thing is, as I said, label all your feelings, which is for your mental hygiene. Speak whatever you want to talk, communicate even uncomfortable thoughts. It's okay. Maintain, even if you get ill, and all the people who've been ill, even during the virus, have been doing physical activities, adequate rest. What this virus does is it needs a lot of rest, a lot of sleep. And the last thing that you need is to be able to actually, one thing which we all need to believe is, which I always tell people, and that's what's held me throughout all these, is just believe that you have hope and you will come through. You may not come through the way you want to, but you will come through. That fundamental belief.
Okay.
Yeah.
My next is Chandy, Usha, and Himaja. Tips to balance work and personal life, suggestions to overcome thinking too much, distraction from work, and procrastination.
The first thing to remember currently is, because we are in this lockdown situation, there is confusion because people are working from home, which means that there is a merging or a gray area of the various roles you play. Your personal, because you're in the home, you don't know when you're doing a personal role, and suddenly in the next minute you're doing a professional role, and there's no real boundaries. So the first step for that is identify some space in your house, some corner, wherever you're going to be working from, and in your head, label that as your workspace. That once you go into that space, it is your workspace, just so that during this time you have that clarity. If you're a parent and you have little children in the house, you need to explain that when mom or dad is in that space, they are working and that's their office. So, which means that they cannot keep disturbing you. The third thing that is also happening to people in work from home is the work timings are extending. It's starting early. We opened the laptops or whatever much before we used to earlier, and we extend it. So have a clear structure for the day. Just like you had a work structure, re-look at that structure so that you have some plan in place how to function during this lockdown. And the last thing is that you're doing this, even if you're in apartments, etc., some physical activity, whether it's walking up and down, some physical activity you need to do. And the last, which I think is very important, all of us need to find at least 10 to 15 minutes of what I call withdrawal time. That is me time, withdrawing from all these various duties and tasks and just being with ourselves, because that helps us replenish our psychological energy. That me time can be meditation, or it can be prayers, or it can be whatever, a little hobby, whatever, but you need to include that in your structure. If you do these things, you will feel much more balanced and less tired or sapped of energy.
That's absolutely true. My next question is from Sandeep. Is watching news good or bad at this point of time? I think
I think
very the younger generation can process this, but the older generation, I feel, are uh, not processing this information too well.
so. I think the first is, when you're watching the news, is it news? Are you watching? Is it information? Are you watching a shouting match? Okay, so I think we need information, and we watch news for relevant information, which is important. So if it's a shouting match, can you find another source for relevant information? That's, to me, very important. Second thing is, this toxic shouting is at 9 and 9:30 in the night, just before you sleep. So what is it doing? You're going to bed in an agitated state. I would encourage people who watch television and who need television to watch something very light, something that's mood elevating, comedy, something that just calms the mind. So I think that's very important. So I
So
think,
don't.
again, and even when you watch movies, I actually discourage people from watching, say, uh, crime movies and thrillers in the night. I say, can you watch this during the day?
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think. Okay. Let me ask you just one last question from Lassie. How can we, this is the same, destigmatize mental illness in society, work, and school?
The more we talk and communicate is when it becomes normal, and then we don't actually find it a stigma. Things become stigmatized when it's secretive, and when it's almost like I have this secret that's shameful. So the more number of people who come out and speak, it will start minimizing the stigma, and because it then educates people simultaneously. Yeah.
Is there anything that you want to end this with?
I would like to end it with, you ask me what gives me hope. I think I would like to actually say the very fact that you had the capacity to just share your vulnerability so publicly really is what people like me take as a personal reward, that we can all overcome the stigma and be together and minimize the shadow pandemic, which I hope won't happen. And thank you for that. I have much gratitude for that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you
Much.
so much. Live. I know you're very busy, and
Thank you.
we have been able to reach out to someone who really needed to hear this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, so that was that. Thank you so much. I really hope that whoever needed to hear this did, and I hope that it comforted you. And we're all in this together. Remember that we're all in this together, and this too shall pass. Bye bye.